Okay, let's dive right into this. Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're going to fundamentally rethink a digital threat that, well, you might actually think you've got a handle on. But trust me, it has evolved into something far, far more dangerous. We are talking about malware, but I need you to completely forget the old days of a computer virus just, slowing down your PC or spamming you with weird pop-ups. Today, we're looking at the anatomy of total digital identity compromise, driven by what the industry calls infostealer malware. This is all about how modern cybercriminals are practically cloning your entire digital life. It's fascinating, it is incredibly urgent, and by the end of this explainer, you're going to see exactly how this threat operates from the ground up, and more importantly, how organizations can actually stop it.
So, here is our roadmap for today. We'll be covering beyond simple password theft, the sheer scale of the threat, the criminal supply chain, exactly how they steal your digital identity, why detecting all this is so incredibly difficult, and finally, how to build resilient defenses. All right, kicking things off with Section 1, Beyond Simple Password Theft. We really need to just leave our outdated notions of what malware actually steals at the door. The big myth here is that you click a bad link and a hacker just grabs your password. But the reality? It's absolute, complete identity compromise. Modern info stealers don't just take a password. They extract this massive, highly contextual package of data called a stealer log. They don't just want the key to your house, right? They want to perfectly clone your entire digital environment so they can seamlessly impersonate you across your personal, financial, and corporate services all at the same time. Moving right along to Section 2, the scale of the threat.
So just how big is this underground economy? Well, brace yourselves, because the recent data is genuinely wild. Consider this massive number, 500%. According to FortiGuard Labs, during 2024 alone, the volume of logs harvested from systems compromised by infostealer malware shot up by 500%. The scale of this underground credential economy has just completely exploded, and it's being driven by malware that is terrifyingly efficient at vacuuming up data from infected devices.
And that 500% spike, it resulted in this jaw-dropping figure: 1.7 billion stolen credential records shared through underground forums in that very same year. Now, the crucial point here is that this figure doesn't necessarily mean 1.7 billion unique people were hacked. Instead, it represents this massive, constantly reusable inventory of digital identities. We aren't talking about static, dusty old passwords. These are fresh, highly contextual packages of stolen data that criminals buy, sell, and weaponize across the entire global financial system.
Which brings us to Section 3, the criminal supply chain.
If you are still picturing a lone hacker in a dark hoodie doing all the work from a basement, it is definitely time to update that mental model. This underground industry has become so highly specialized, with a really precise division of labor. First off, you have the malware developers. They actually build and maintain the software. Then you've got the distributors, the folks who actually trick people into downloading it. Next up, log market operators step in to organize all that stolen data, while access brokers sift through it to pick out the absolute most valuable credentials. Finally, you have the downstream criminals who buy that access to conduct the actual account takeovers, fraud, or extortion. So the person who infects a home PC with, say, a fake game mod is rarely the exact same person emptying out a corporate bank account at the end of the chain.
To really put this professionalization into perspective, let's look at a specific enforcement action from May 2025. Microsoft and its international partners actually disrupted an operation known as Llama Stealer, and this was quite literally malware as a service. In just a 2-month window, Microsoft identified over 394,000 infected Windows devices, and the FBI identified at least 1.7 million instances of theft. The downstream criminals utilizing this? They didn't even have to write a single line of code. Hundreds of affiliates literally just rented the Llama tool to fuel their specific part of the supply chain.
Let's shift gears to Section 4, stealing your digital identity.
Okay, this is the climax of the crimes acquisition phase. We need to look closely at what is exactly inside these devastating stealer logs. When a device gets infected, the malware just grabs this extensive, crazy list of data. I mean, yes, it takes your credentials, of course, but it also takes your autofill data. Things like your name and saved credit cards. It takes your browser history, your emails, and even your cryptocurrency seed phrases. But I want you to pay super close attention to this one: session cookies and tokens. This is an absolute game changer. When you log into an account, a token is created so you don't have to keep logging in for every single click you make. If criminals steal that active session cookie, they can just replay the authenticated session. This literally means they can completely bypass traditional multi-factor authentication because as far as the system is concerned, you already passed the security check.
And this brilliantly illustrates how the whole problem compounds. According to Verizon's 2025 Data Breach Investigations report, in the median case of Infostealer data, only 49% of an infected user's passwords were actually distinct. 51% were reused. And because of this massive password reuse, a single isolated device infection can suddenly expose multiple online banking, crypto, and corporate accounts all simultaneously. It spreads like wildfire.
And the danger definitely doesn't just fade away quickly. An investigation by Google's Mandiant actually found that threat actors were accessing customer-managed cloud databases using credentials stolen from infections dating way back to 2020. This highlights a genuinely terrifying concept in the industry known as credential longevity. Basically, if an organization or a user doesn't regularly rotate their passwords, these old stealer logs retain their devastating value for literally years.
All right, let's look at Section 5, why detection is difficult. So you are probably wondering, how on earth does this go unnoticed? Well, let's look at this from the perspective of the defense teams. Because the attackers actually possess your exact contextual data straight from the stealer log, catching them is just incredibly hard. They use your perfectly valid session tokens, they completely reconstruct your specific device's fingerprint, and they utilize residential internet proxies so their physical location doesn't even look suspicious. To a cybersecurity or a fraud team, the malicious activity looks exactly like legitimate customer access. Furthermore, automated credential stuffing traffic, where hackers use bots to rapidly test massive lists of stolen passwords, that represents 19 to 25% of daily authentication attempts for some organizations. This means these targeted attacks just blend right into the everyday background noise of the internet.
To really underscore just how stealthy this is, listen to this warning from the Australian Cybersecurity Centre. They stated, information stealers are designed to operate without detection and may delete themselves after collecting information, meaning victims almost never see a drop in their computer's performance. The malware simply gets in, vacuums up your entire digital life in seconds, transmits the log, and vanishes without a trace. Often, your endpoint security tools will only alert you well after the data is already gone.
Finally, we have Section 6, building resilient defenses.
So how do we actually fight back against this? Let's move to our action plan and see how this builds a truly resilient control stack. A single layer just isn't going to cut it anymore. You need all of these working in tandem. It starts right at the foundation with device security, meaning solid endpoint protection, rapid patching, and staff training. Next is identity assurance, utilizing phishing-resistant MFA like passkeys. Then we have session governance. Basically, do not let those session tokens live forever. Shorten their lifetimes. Behavioral monitoring comes next to flag unusual activity, like impossible travel, while exposure intel is out there actively watching the dark web for your compromised logs. And finally, transaction protection really ties the whole shebang together. If a login looks even slightly risky, it should immediately restrict high-value payments. Cybersecurity, identity, and financial crime teams absolutely must integrate these signals, because what one team might miss in isolation, the fully integrated stack is going to catch.
Now, if the worst happens and an infection does occur, this is what a highly effective response has to look like. Removing the malware, that is only step one. You must then change your credentials, but you have to do it from a completely separate, clean device. And crucially, as we learned just a moment ago, you absolutely must invalidate all active sessions and tokens. Simply resetting a password creates a very dangerous false reassurance if the hacker's stolen session cookie is still active out there. Finally, you have to comprehensively review all financial transactions and beneficiaries, and strictly audit any exposed corporate access. I want to wrap up this explainer by leaving all the IT and financial crime leaders tuning in with a pretty provocative question. Are you defending against password theft or identity compromise? Because as we've clearly seen today, the game has fundamentally changed. The organizations that will survive this landscape are the ones that treat every single malware infection as a potential major financial crime event. You have to neutralize the full exposed identity and connect your cyber intelligence directly with your fraud prevention long before that stolen access turns into stolen funds. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer today. I really hope this helped you understand exactly what we're up against out there, and more importantly, how to stop it cold.